Brian Bethel, a journalist from Abilene, Texas, was sitting in his car, parked outside a movie theater, on a quiet evening in 1996. He had been preparing to leave when he was approached by two children, a boy and a girl, who appeared out of nowhere. The boy was about 9 or 10 years old, and the girl looked to be a little younger, around 6 or 7. They were standing on the sidewalk in front of Bethel's car, looking up at him, waiting. The first thing that caught Bethel's attention was the odd timing. There were no other people around, and the area was typically quiet at night. At first, the children appeared to be harmless. They were dressed in clothing that seemed unusual for the weather, but nothing too strange, just a bit out of place. The girl spoke first, asking Bethel for a ride to their home, which was several miles away. The boy stood silently next to her, but both seemed calm and polite, as if they were just regular children. However, Bethel, who had been a journalist and was accustomed to dealing with strange situations, noticed something was off. The girl continued to speak softly, almost rehearsed, asking Bethel again if he could give them a ride home. The request seemed innocent enough, but there was an unsettling quality about it. Bethel wasn't sure why, but he felt an inexplicable sense of dread. He hadn't been in the habit of giving rides to strangers, especially at night, so he politely refused and attempted to explain that he couldn't help them. But the more he spoke, the more agitated and persistent the children became. As Bethel was about to drive away, the true horror of the situation revealed itself. When he looked into the children's eyes, he froze. Both children had completely black eyes. There were no whites, sclera, or iris, just solid blackness. The overwhelming darkness in their eyes was so unnatural that it made Bethel feel as if he were in the presence of something not human. His heart began to race, and an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him. It was as if the children weren't just trying to get a ride, they were trying to control him, hypnotize him into giving in. The boy spoke again, his voice more insistent than before, his eyes now reflecting an almost malevolent energy. Bethel could feel his body becoming tense, and every instinct in him screamed to drive away, but he was frozen with fear. Something deep inside him told him that if he let the children in, something terrible would happen. He was no longer just dealing with children who needed help. He was dealing with something dark, something that did not belong in this world. At that moment, Bethel snapped out of his paralysis and quickly started his car. His hands were shaking as he put the car in reverse and sped away, not daring to look back. He didn't know what those children were, but he had an intense, terrifying feeling that they were not just lost children. They were something else. Something that was possibly supernatural, or even demonic. Bethel later recounted the incident on a local paranormal forum, describing the overwhelming fear and the strange, unnatural aura the children exuded. He admitted that despite the bizarre nature of the encounter, he could not explain exactly what had happened. He was convinced that the children were not of this world, and the experience left him with a lasting sense of unease. This encounter would become one of the foundational stories in the growing phenomenon of black-eyed children. Over time, other people came forward with similar experiences, sharing stories of black-eyed children who had approached them at night, asking to come inside their homes or cars. The consistent and eerie nature of these encounters suggested that there was something more to these beings than just an urban legend. Bethel's story continues to be one of the most frightening and famous accounts of a black-eyed children encounter. His experience serves as a cautionary tale, reminding people of the dangers of accepting seemingly harmless requests from strangers, especially when those strangers have eyes that reflect nothing but blackness. As the years go by, more and more individuals have shared their terrifying encounters with black-eyed children, contributing to a growing mystery that remains unsolved. Whether these children are supernatural beings, alien entities, or something else entirely, one thing is clear. They inspire an overwhelming sense of fear and leave a mark on anyone who comes into contact with them. It's one of the most chilling and widely discussed accounts of an encounter with black-eyed children. It revolves around the Broaddus family, who, in 2014, purchased their dream home at 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. What should have been an exciting and joyous experience quickly turned into a nightmare when they began receiving disturbing letters from a mysterious figure known only as the Watcher. The Broaddus family, Derek, Maria, and their 3 young children, were eager to start fresh in their new home. The large house was in an affluent neighborhood, and they had high hopes of raising their children in a peaceful environment.
They had big plans for the home, which required some renovations before they moved in. However, the moment they began their renovations, they unknowingly attracted the attention of someone, or something, that would bring them nothing but fear. On June 4th, 2014, when the family received the first of what would become several disturbing letters. The letter was addressed to the new owner of 657 Boulevard. It was postmarked from Westfield, New Jersey, but the writer's identity was a complete mystery. The letter began innocuously enough, but the tone quickly became sinister and unsettling. The writer claimed to have been watching the house for years, waiting for the arrival of new occupants. It became clear that the watcher knew intimate details about the Broaddus family, such as the names of their children, and even referenced the ongoing renovations in the house. The letter stated, "I am the watcher and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have watched." The writer then went on to discuss how they were watching the family and would continue to do so. The letter mentioned the children in a disturbingly detailed way, referencing their activities and routines. The watcher seemed to be waiting for the family to make changes to the house and grow accustomed to their new life. The letter ended with a chilling promise: "I will find out." Naturally, the Broaddus family was shocked. They immediately contacted the police, who began investigating the situation. While the authorities suggested that the letter could simply be a prank, the details and tone of the message were deeply unsettling.
As the family tried to process what had just happened, they received a second letter just a few days later. This letter was even more menacing, referencing their children once again, and hinting that the watcher was keeping track of every move they made. The letter mentioned that the watcher had been observing them for a long time, watching them through the windows of their house, and made veiled threats about what would happen if they didn't comply with the watcher's requests. The second letter included this ominous passage: "The house is a very special place. It has been the subject of my attention for many years. I am the watcher, and now I am waiting for you to come inside and reveal yourself." As the days passed, the letters kept coming. Each one was filled with more references to the family's children, their routines, and unsettling predictions about what was to come. The watcher seemed to be growing bolder, and the Broaddus family began to feel a creeping sense of paranoia. They felt they were being watched every minute of the day, and the worst part was that no one had any idea who could be behind the letters. The family took every precaution they could think of. They installed security cameras, hired private investigators, and tried to track down the author of the letters, but all efforts proved pointless. The police investigation was unable to uncover any solid leads, and no one in the neighborhood seemed to know anything about the watcher's identity. In one of the most eerie details of the case, the Broaddus family learned that the previous owners of the house had never received any similar letters. This led them to believe that the watcher's attention had been specifically focused on their family, raising questions about whether the watcher had been stalking the house for years before the Broaddus family even moved in. They attempted to sell the house, but no one would buy it. Potential buyers were scared off by the strange letters and the reputation the house had acquired. In 2017, the Broaddus family filed a lawsuit against the previous owners of the house, claiming they had failed to disclose the letters when they sold the property. However, the case was dismissed in court. The Broaddus family's nightmare continued, as the watcher's letters remained a terrifying mystery. Despite their best efforts to find out who was behind the letters, the identity of the watcher remained elusive. Over the years, many theories have been proposed about who the watcher might be, but no definitive answers have emerged. Some believe that the watcher is a local resident with a personal connection to the house, while others suspect that the letters may have been written by a more sinister figure. Theories about the watcher's identity continue to swirl, but the mystery remains unsolved. The Broaddus family's horrifying experience remains one of the most unsettling stories of modern-day stalking, and remains unsolved, leaving many questions unanswered and fears unaddressed. Lake Lurleen State Park, nestled in the picturesque landscape of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is often considered a serene retreat for nature lovers, offering camping, hiking, and tranquil views of the lake. However, beneath the park's beauty lies a darker history, one associated with eerie occurrences that have caused many to question the peacefulness of the park's woods and cabins. In the early 2000s, a seemingly innocent weekend getaway took a terrifying turn for a group of college students from the University of Alabama. The group of students, eager for a break from their hectic school life, rented one of the park's rustic cabins for a relaxing weekend retreat. The cabin, nestled among tall trees and situated near the tranquil waters of Lake Lurleen, seemed like the perfect place to unwind and enjoy nature.
The weekend started as expected for the first few hours. They hiked along the park's trails, gathered around a campfire, and shared stories. Everything appeared peaceful, and the night sky glowed with stars, setting the perfect ambiance for a relaxing time away from their studies. But soon after the students retired to the cabin, the peaceful atmosphere would start to unravel. On the first night, one of the students, Sarah, was the first to notice something strange. As she lay in bed, she began hearing faint sounds coming from the walls. At first, it seemed harmless, maybe just the settling of the cabin or the sounds of animals outside. But as the night wore on, the noises grew louder and more distinct, scratching and scurrying, as though something was moving inside the walls of the cabin. Sarah initially brushed it off, thinking it was perhaps a rodent or insect, but the sound persisted, becoming more unnerving with each passing minute. She tried to ignore it and drifted back to sleep, but the noises continued, almost as though something was trying to get in.
The other students in the cabin didn't take the noises seriously at first, assuming that nature was simply making its presence known. However, as the night deepened, things escalated. One of the other students, Tom, claimed to have seen a shadowy figure moving through the cabin. The figure seemed to glide across the room, casting an unsettling silhouette against the dim light. Tom's heart raced as he blinked in disbelief, trying to rationalize the experience, but when he looked again, the figure was gone, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of dread. There was no one else in the cabin, and yet, it felt as though they were not alone. Terrified, the group attempted to sleep through the night, but the unease only grew. The scratching and tapping on the walls continued, growing more intense, as though something or someone was moving within the very structure of the cabin. The air felt cold, even though the heating system was working fine. A sudden drop in temperature hit the living room, and a chilling cold spot seemed to materialize out of nowhere, causing the group to huddle together in fear. The students felt as though they were being watched, their every movement scrutinized by an unseen presence. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the windows, the group was in a state of panic. They decided to leave the cabin immediately, abandoning their planned weekend getaway. The students packed up their belongings in haste and drove back to Tuscaloosa, too terrified to speak much during the ride. They couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching them, something sinister that had lurked in the shadows of the cabin. Upon returning to their college town, the group began researching the cabin and the park's history. To their shock, they discovered that they weren't the first to experience strange occurrences at the cabin. The park had long been associated with eerie events. Other campers and visitors had reported hearing unexplained noises, seeing ghostly apparitions, and feeling inexplicable cold spots in the cabin. Some claimed that the cabin was haunted by the spirits of those who had passed away in the park, while others believed that something even darker resided in the woods surrounding the area. Local legends spoke of tragic deaths and mysterious disappearances that had taken place in the park over the years, leading some to believe that restless spirits now haunted the cabin, seeking revenge or trying to communicate with the living. Despite the park's picturesque beauty, a sense of unease surrounded it, especially in the more secluded areas near the cabin. In the years since, many others have ventured into Lake Lurleen State Park, but the haunted cabin continues to be a source of fear and trepidation. It remains a place where stories of strange noises, shadowy figures, and ghostly encounters persist. Whether the area is truly haunted or simply the product of overactive imaginations, it remains a chilling reminder that even the most peaceful of places can conceal dark secrets.